Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma231 here today to talk about Link Click. And you guys may know that here recently on the channel, I put a video sort of detailing my entirety of the thoughts on Season 1 of Link Click. And it was a show that I really decently enjoyed. And if you want to hear my full thoughts, you can go listen to that video there where you hear my expanded thoughts on the first season. But I really enjoyed it enough, and the second season was currently airing, so I was like, you know what, it's going to take me a little while to get caught up current, but why don't I review Link Click Season 2 as it comes out? So today, you heard it right, I'm going to be talking about the first episode of Season 2 of Link Click. So yeah, I'm honestly very excited to do this and just talk about the episodes, break them down episode by episode. This is similar to things I've done with Bleach, 1000 Year Blood War, the first core of the arcs being that I haven't even started with the second core yet, and our series like Chainsaw Man that I have tried, like Kakariko, Hell's Paradise. So this is going to be that same exact vein of video, so I hope you're excited, and just, yeah, let's get started with it. So this episode really just starts off with, like, the whole Link Click, what happened last time. We get a mini sort of recap. Before that, we sort of get, like, a weird sort of introduction scene where it's, like, this still image of Xing and Lu, who are sort of staying there, and Xing's like, hey, make sure to follow us and like and subscribe for more content, right? And it's just, like, this really weird, like, follow thing that just happens. I mean, I don't really know what to exactly call it. It's just something that sort of just happens and is just very confusing to me, right? But at that point, the next thing we get is the entirety of the Season 1 recap. So, like, the whole thing of here are the rules for going back in time with the Time Photo Studio and the powers, and how really all of that stuff works, and sort of just delving into the idea of Emma and Lu Min. So just going through all of that stuff. And if you are watching this video, you have probably watched Season 1 and don't really need me to do an entire recap of Season 1, right? Next up is the opening, which is, I find to be a very interesting song because it starts off very muddled, and it has English lyrics going throughout the middle of it, and eventually you start to understand the English lyrics more, and it's like sort of talking about, like, what do we do whenever we try to save the world? And it's just this really idealistic song that eventually we just see a bunch of visuals of Xing just going through and, like, falling through, like, through a cityscape, and it's very interesting. And then eventually it's almost like the song doubles back on itself, right, and goes in reverse as all of the other events that sort of happen in the opening sort of just replay out. And it's just a very interesting visual style and sound style that we sort of hear throughout the entire opening. But the opening is titled Vortex, and it is made by Jaws. And Jaws are the same people who made the opening and ending for Season 1 of Link Click. So that's pretty cool to know. After the opening, of course, we get the title screen, which is this, like, really weird, again, like, this is, like, the last, like, that's an interesting design choice thing of the episode, is it's, like, this really interesting, like, not, like, it's not quite 3D, but it's still more realistic. I mean, it probably is 3D, don't get me wrong, but it's, like, more realized than, like, actual 2D animation. It's just, like, a really weird style, and that's just pretty much there to just sort of show us, like, our three main characters, and Xing, Lu, and Qiaoling, and they're all there, and we just get the title of the episode, which is Falling. So I wonder what that's going to mean in the whole context of the episode. We'll see. Right, but as we finally sort of start the episode, it starts off exactly where the last episode ended off, right? With Xing just getting back from the past where he sort of met with Emma, and Emma had fallen off the bridge due to the mysterious, what would you call him? The imposter? I don't know. I don't remember what they were calling him in the episode. I watched this thing last night and took notes on it and couldn't record it because of my situation. So that's fun. So it's sort of this thing where Xing finds Lu, and Qiaoling has the knife, and she just had stabbed Lu, right? And it's the whole big deal of where Xing's just like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? What's going on, right? And it sort of starts off this conflict between Qiaoling, who is, of course, possessed the possessor, that's the word, right? Who is possessed, and Shing, they sort of just go back and forth, and eventually this idea of, like, I just said what the possessor is just like, hey, so what do you think you're doing here, right? And she's just like, hey, if we want to be friends, we need to build trust between us, right? And Shing is just like, okay, well, how do we do that? And the possessor is just like, all right, so how about this? You tell me how your power fully works, right? And she pretty much just says that, all right, so I know you activate it when you clap because I was easily able to tell that multiple times, right? So at that point, it's just a whole idea of what is the other activation ability, right? Or what happens whenever you disappear, right? And she's like, whatever you do, don't lie to me. As what does Shing do? He ends up lying, saying that he just has a teleportation power that teleports him and he needs to concentrate on it, and that's why there was a really small room going on in here, right? And we sort of just get this idea, and she's just like, oh, you're lying to me, you're just lying to me, right? As she pretty much says, like, well, here's the thing, I know the room was lined with photos, I thought it was just to rile me up, but now I understand you need photos as well. Sort of implying that, yes, this imposter who also goes into people's bodies and makes them do bad things, unlike what Lu and Shing do with the Time Photo Studio, right? The whole idea is, yeah, this person can enter photos too of people. And a few other interesting notes is that it's a big thing throughout the episode of sort of where she's like, all right, so you told me Lu's name, right? So now I know his name. It seems like the names may be a decently important scope of information in this whole idea of what the imposter's power set is, or the possessor's power set. Well, as it goes on, right, Kiao's just like, all right, so you obviously want to get back at me, right, and try to get me out of this girl's body, and you aren't going to tell me the truth, so how about this? As she turns the knife on herself and ends up trying to, like, stab herself in the stomach, right, and at this point, we have a really cool sort of fight scene between both Shing and Kiao, as they're sort of just going back and forth, right, and we sort of get this flashback from Shing's perspective as he was learning sort of the mixed martial arts, only from what I can presume to be the episode 5.5, which we actually don't have here in the States, so, or dubbed, because that's how I've been watching this, so we don't actually have an episode dubbed, right, but it's pretty much a guy with the voice of Gran Torino from My Hero Academia, right, as he's like just this old mentor, and he's just sort of telling Shing and Lu, like, how to fight with somebody if they have a knife in their hand, right? And it's this really cool picture as we see all of them fighting each other, right? And sort of the roles are being reversed, as in the flashback, this old man is the one sort of completely dominating Shing, but in the present, Shing is the one absolutely dominating Kiao. And it's pretty much just that idea of that back and forth motion, and it's just a really cool image altogether, right? And as everything just keeps going on, the possessor eventually says something of, I don't know, I really like your power, I may want to take it too, also implying that they may be able to take the powers of other people. So that's just going to be something interesting to see later off, because that is obviously something that was really focused on more than the as well earlier, because I'm guessing we all knew that photos had to do something with the possessor's power system. So just this whole idea of as well and I can take your powers is like, okay, where's that going to lead us eventually, right? But as all of this sort of happens, earlier in the episode, I didn't mention it, but we saw some police and their cruisers outside, right? And they got called on a duty, so they were coming in to check on Shing and Lu before they left. And as they walk in, they see all this conflict going on, as we see that Shing eventually took the knife from Xiaoling to prevent her from stabbing herself, right? And at this point, the police start to walk in, Shing has the knife, and the possessor leaves Xiao's body, right? As she's just like, oh, hey, what are you doing, Shing? Like, what's going on here, right? And it's this thing to where he's just like, hey, everything will be fine, don't worry about it. As the police come in and are just like, oh, look at that, Lou is there on the ground, right? And, oh no, what are you doing? And they sort of shove Ching against the wall, and it's like, hey, you're coming with us. You're the one with the knife, right? And he's just like, hey, I don't care about me. Go check on Lou. I want him to survive. And we sort of end off this initial scene with Cloud just screaming because, yeah, one of her two best friends is dead on the ground, right? And it's this big moment. Well, at this point, we cut to a sort of montage of Lou having surgery to sort of try to survive this fatal knife stab in him. And fatal stab wound, yeah, I don't think knife stab is really the best wording to use there. And also Ching sort of going through this interview with the police detectives being like, hey, it wasn't me, right? But they're like, but you were the only one in the room, right? And we cut back between these moments, sort of evenly timed throughout, as eventually, as everything is happening here, we just get this idea of, like, Ching asks for Xiao Li, who is the All Might sounding cop, like the main head detective here, and we also know that, yeah, he's got the same voice actor as All Might from My Hero Academia, Christopher Sabat, so I just call him All Might Detective because it's just what he sounds like, and I can't hear that voice without thinking of All Might. I mean, that was one of my first anime, so that's like one of my first roles I think of whenever I hear Christopher Sabat's voice. But as everything just keeps going on, we get the idea that Lou is dead as we see like a shot of them trying to resuscitate somebody. But fun fact, they don't actually have a stab wound in this scene. I wonder if that's going to come up, right? But we get this idea that Lou's dead as we sort of see that Ching is asking for Xiao Li. And everything just keeps going on, right? And we then cut out to Xiao Li, who is also sitting with, what's his name? I've got it written some here, Chin Bean, right? And they're sort of saying there, Chin Bean is the assistant detective that we've seen throughout the entire series of Xiao Li. And they're sort of just sitting there talking, right? And we pretty much see that Xiao Li is very angry on the phone. Just like, you're telling me you didn't even attempt to talk to their family? I mean, what happened? It was like a split second, right? Obviously saying things that we don't understand currently in the episode, but we'll understand later in the episode. And as everything is going on, he comes and sits by Xiao Being, is like, hey, did you talk to the imminent family, right? And as all of this is going on, we sort of cut off to who we presume to be Lu Min's family. And of course, Lu Min is the killer who we've seen throughout this entire thing. He was somebody who was being possessed by the possessor before all of this happened and before really the time studio got involved with everything, right? And they have just a conversation with Lu Min's family, his dad specifically, and a few other people. And they mentioned something about the metaverse, which is sort of like, okay, that works, right? But as they just keep talking, right, it's just this back and forth between them as the father gets a call, and apparently it is from this mysterious detective guy who we sort of just see a montage of him sort of suiting up and going on about everything, right? And it's just this really weird deal of just this guy getting dressed, and what connection do they really have to Lu Min? As we continue, we eventually get back to the jail cell with Ching as somebody has brought him food, and it is this whole big idea to where the person asks, like, hey, how's it going, man? Are you alright? And Ching just asks, like, hey, how is Lou? Like, I mean, is he alright? And this cop says that Lu Min has died. And at this point, we get this sort of really emotional sort of flashback with Ching as he sort of just thinks of Lou and as he just cries and everything. And it's this real big deal because, I mean, his probably best friend is just dead, right? And eventually he remembers one of the things about, hey, don't change the past. As he looks down at his hands and he's just like, hey, I could clap right now, go to the past and solve all of this, right? All I would need is just one simple picture, right? It's presumed that a little bit more time sort of passes on from here until eventually Chin Bean, who is, of course, the detective assistant, comes in to pick up Ching and is pretty much just like, hey, yeah, we're going to go see Lu Min, and are you sort of all caught up on the situation? And he's just like, you sure? Right? Obviously not knowing what this situation is, which is another thing that comes up later. And they sort of just have a car ride, right? As this whole idea of being filled in comes in, right? And all of a sudden, Chin Bean's phone rings, right? And I have to say, like, this is the most stock ringtone I think I've ever heard. Like, it's just like, yeah, of course that's the ringtone that somebody would use. I mean, it's literally like the stock thing that comes on the phone, right? And eventually we learn that Chinbing sort of has a family to go home to, and we sort of learn that there is somebody named Captain Jin that is at their door to see him, right? And it's this interesting idea of who is this Captain Jin, and this whole idea of Chin just being like, oh, well, that's pretty interesting. Well, just tell him I've got work to do and I'll be back home later, right? Oh, man, I wonder if he's going to make it back home later, right? But as everything just keeps going on, we see that Ching is holding, or Xing, I don't know how to say it, right? He's holding Chin's phone, right? And it's this whole idea of where there's a picture on the front of it, right? And it's a picture of from 2 years ago with Chin's family. We don't really need to get into that, but it's pretty much this moment where he's like, hey, if I clap and use this picture, I can go 2 whole years in the past, make sure none of this stuff ever happened, right? And he really almost does it until there's this moment where he thinks of Lumine in his head and is like, hey, yeah, I just seriously can't do that. That wouldn't be the right thing for me to do, right? Well, eventually they actually get to the place where Lumine is being held, and it's this whole idea where, not Lumine, just a Lu, just a regular Lu that we know and love, right? And eventually we see that Chin gave Ching some clothes to be like, hey, you can have these, we don't want Lu seeing you all in these bloody clothes, right? And as he walks into the room and just crying, we actually see that Lu is alive, right? And we pretty much learn that there was just some false information given throughout the divisions, and one of the police officers was just an idiot being like, hey, I'm not going to give a suspect live information. So it's just really the whole deal there, and just a few jokes about Lu being like, hey, I'm sorry I was dead, right? So that's just the whole idea here, and eventually, as this all continues, right, pretty much Shaoling is also in the room, and it's pretty much just like, hey, so Lumine is actually the one who is dead, right? He strangled himself with his handcuffs, and we sort of just get this flashback to see what we saw was a big, just like false misdirection, right? It was a misdirection animation because we actually didn't see the face who the pals were being put on, and that's why there was no stab wound, saying that, yeah, it was just misdirection showing that Lumine was the one who died, not Lu, right? That's a pretty sort of interesting way to do it. I sort of like how that misdirection all got done. So as everything just keeps going on, we cut back to this mysterious detective as he's on the phone to Liu Ming's father, right? And it's this big idea to where they're just like, okay, so, and the father's just like, hey, I don't care about my son, right? All I care is about his assets, right? And the detective's like, well, his assets are now in legal custody, so that may prove a problem to us. And he's like, I don't care. I won't rest until I have my son Liu Ming's phone in my hands. At this point, it's time for me to flip over my notes. So let me get that going as I start to talk about what happened next. And at this point where we get this whole idea of Shaoling pretty much like saying like, all right, so the only piece of evidence we have is Liu Ming's phone, of course, what his father and this mysterious detective want. And as they have the phone in hands, it is this idea to where they're like, and they give it to Lu to sort of say, hey, can you look in the phone, look at any of the pictures, see if you can find out anything, right? And we see that Chin hands over the phone, saying that he was the one who had it then, right? And as everything just keeps going on, we eventually see that Chin sort of starts to run and back out of the room, and you can just barely tell, but he has possessed eyes, that sort of reddish glow to him, right? And as Lu's just like, all right, let's get ready to look, he clicks on it, right? And Xing realizes, oh, that's Chin Bean's phone, right? As we see that Chin is nowhere to be found, right? And we see that Captain Shao obviously runs after him, like, all right, so he has Lumine's phone, what is he trying to do with it, right? As all of this sort of just keeps happening, we get this sort of flashback as Ching starts to run out of the room too, obviously going to go try to help Captain Xiao and to find Chin Bean. As all of this is going on, he sort of looks back and sees Qiao Ling and Lu in the room, and just sort of can't get the idea out of his head of when Qiao Ling stabbed Lu earlier in the episode, or the last season, whatever you want to call it. And Ching sort of has this moment where he's like, I can't run, it's going to be better if I stand here, right? As we eventually see that Captain Xiao is out on the sort of road looking for him, and he's talking on the phone with Ching, and so they're sort of talking back and forth, and we get this whole idea of where Xiao is just like looking, or Xiao is looking around, it's like, alright, what's going on here? And we then see the mysterious detective up on somebody's house, sort of ringing a doorbell, right? And we don't really know what's going on with that. And the next thing we see is we cut down to where Xiao Ling is, and he's sort of walking through like a car park, and there's like a lone car in front of him, and as he's sort of looking around, we cut again to where this mysterious detective actually touches the doorbell, rings it, and this really weird demented music plays as we see Chin Bean's body falling off of like a roof, and he ends up landing on this car with blood spewing out of his face, and he is dead, right? And he's murdered on top of this car. As we see Captain Xiao's just like, what's going on here? As we end the episode with, of course, the ending, which is titled The Tides by Fan Ka. This ending is sort of like an interesting one. There isn't like a whole lot really going on in it, and I'm sure as we keep going through this season, all of these sort of information and visuals will probably mean more as everything keeps going on. But right now, it's sort of just like, it's just an ending, right? Nothing really more to it. And that is the first episode of Season 2 of Link Click. I really thoroughly enjoyed talking about this. There was sort of a lot of moving parts in it, sort of just really the whole big idea was the misguided death of Liu Min and Lu. So it was just that whole idea of, alright, who actually died? And I really love the inner struggle that Ching had with himself whenever he was like, hey, I could go back in the past right now and completely redo everything. And he sort of thinks of his friend Lu, and it's like, no, he wouldn't want me to do that, and sort of goes against it, right? I felt like that was a really nice moment. And then sort of the final moment of like, all right, what actually happened with Chin Bean? Because initially I actually had sort of a theory that Chin Bean was the one who was behind all of the murders, and he was sort of working with Captain Shaw. And then we sort of learned that he wasn't, and there's this possessor, and I was like starting to warm up to him. And of course they show like the details with his family, and it sort of makes you care about him as a character before they untimely kill him off as a character. So that was really well done. And with that, I don't really have too much more to say about Link Click, episode 1 of season 2, titled Falling. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and if you enjoyed this too, maybe you're going to like my other video where I talked about the entirety of season 1 of Link Click. That is also on the channel, so you can go check that out. And with that, I also cover many other anime and manga series on the channel, so if anything like Oshinoko, World Trigger, Tenmaku Cinema, or any of series like those sound interesting to you, or just general Shonen Jump stuff, go check out my channel. I may have a video on something that you're looking for. And with that, if you enjoyed this video, hope you won't mind liking and subscribing, doing all of that good stuff. It really does a lot for me, and it's something very simple to do. And with that, I'll be back next time to talk about Link Click, Season 2, Episode 2. And yeah, this is going to be Glowplasma231. Out.